without any further ado, Hastings Hensel.
Thank you for being here. It's no small task to get here at the end of the conference when, as we've been saying, we're all a little lame, afraid, and disheveled at this point. That's been the refrain. I'm going to be reading from this new collection, Ballyhoo, which is kind of engaging with comedy and laughter and farce and parody and satire and clowns and things that are of all time, but especially of our time. And I'm going to go with some more specific thank yous in a little bit, but thank you for being here. I'm going to begin with a poem that I titled right after the election, although it doesn't really engage with that, but it's called Reality is Prank. Maybe you've had that sentiment. And I've read some of these poems before, but forgive me, but it's nice to read them in this book form. And as someone said to me, you always had a soft spot for repetition. Reality is prank. The trees, they told us, were trees, and we believed. We, pointing, said tree, and they agreed. Then, in turn, we learned how tree is word, how word is only air we breathe, or dark marks on a blank page. Tree is no more tree than you are you, and I am not me. In time, we grew inclined to disbelieve. For love is a joke we tell ourselves, a mere cloak for the libido, and truth, beauty, God, words, 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 absurd. Our best guess, just simulation. Even this story of Dostoevsky, how blindly led he met the firing squad, smacks of fiction. How he kissed the cross, took a piss, all this for the last time, then stood in line until a messenger arrived to say, well, something along the lines of a punchline. Stop this execution. Remove the blindfolds. Long live the czar. So that was that, a simple waking. And then there was light. The world returned, more than word. The trees defined and swaying in the distance in a kind of slow underwater silence. If so, wake me again then in the room where I no longer lie alone. Speak to me. Tell me you were kidding, that cruelty is a joke, that the fragrance of jasmine drifts in again through the open window, that the trees are trees, that I am pardoned. I thought I'd read a little companion piece to that essentially is a love poem called Any Which Way You Cut It. And the only thing you might need to know about this is when I say the Dole watermelon, Dole has a little trademark sign next to it. It's kind of important, but can't see it. Any which way you cut it. Whatever the Dole watermelon meant when I split and bit into it, if I'd bought into the myth, as if by the myth we meant the corporate clickbait ideal of Americana continually fattening the factory farm, well, true that. And even if the summer day was, I said, a bluebird day, and what I said was cliche, for language is mostly fossil anyway, well, true that too. And in spite of the probability that everything about that summer, fruit, table, sky, view, me, you, us, was simply simulation, all a game, a matrix of information, well, true, true, true. But can I tell you something? It's not even a secret. It was damn sweet to have the juice run down our fingers, to say I love you, to lean back and look into a sky we agreed truly was blue. This book is dedicated to my mother's childhood imaginary friend. And like a lot of children, my mother would blame the bad things she did on this friend, Biddy. And my grandmother took her out in the backyard one day and made her have a funeral for Biddy. And so I think that this book kind of exists in that space of absurdity and performance and nothingness and comedy and sadness that is kind of about that. And I'm going to read a poem called, it has an epigraph from Arthur Miller's essay, Tragedy in the Common Man. And the epigraph is the disaster inherent in being torn away from our chosen image of what and who we are in this world. But this is not tragedy in the common man. This is comedy in the uncommon woman. Chain smoking, my mother one-handed swung the swing with me in it. It's where I must have learned her humor, pushed away each time I came back to her. At last we both laughed, so I jumped, thudded in sand, then sprung up to see a man, a stranger, not my father, who'd emerged from the park's thicket and stunk muskily of what even then, unmistakably, was whiskey. Your boy, he muttered, seems so familiar. Isn't he the missing one I've seen on all the posters? The time of the Lord had come, he said, to take me away, to claim his just reward. He touched me on the shoulder. How unfunny, I learned, the world can suddenly become. And there in the high sun of summer, yes, how much colder. My mother ground her butt down by heel, lit one. Oh, she joked, that's him all right. And the kidnapper, she's me. Then my mother laughed her high, hard laugh. I didn't know it then, but then must have been when I discovered we could have been another. Any other. Not son and mother, but two strangers gathered together for no better reason than a joke. And it must have been when I learned how laughter can disarm like smoke. For his part, I saw that man years later, hawking watches near a public fountain. But as for my mother, I caught her just once, I thought, as though off stage from inside a bar I passed. Not her face, which is hard to remember, and no light shone through the glass, but inside twice, like the strikes of a hammer, those, hers, high, hard laughs. I'm going to read a poem called Playing Cards with Mark Strand. If y'all were here, Buzz used to put on a poker game, and it's really surreal to be able to play cards with someone as famous and as wonderful as Mark. Of this I'm sure, I wasn't sure. Perhaps he had what he hadn't, two of a kind of rhyme, something that might suggest the world less random than the world of which he'd written thus suggest. Something, yes, metrical, a straight or flush, but I'd guess to call his bluff because I too can doubt. Nothing, no thing, or nothingness? I have nothing, he said, then laid his cards face up so that we saw he told the truth. So funny, yes, how he said it, so Mark Strand-esque. I have nothing. And now we laugh because that was something, at least somethingness. I'm going to read a poem called That Laugh You Have, or a study in the Via Negativa. And the Via Negativa, you may recall, is confirming something by negation. That laugh you have, or a study in the Via Negativa. That laugh you have, although it's close to this, is not a rustle in the high grass over which the wind has passed, nor glassy breaker sets, shore crashed, nor glass itself, softly broken between sheets of felt, nor gull flocks lifting, nor any river running over river stones that bends, brushing willow limbs. And though I'm getting closer, that laugh you have is not the green world's mumble, swishes in the thicket where clumps of trumpet vine, smilax, and sumac swell, contract perennially, and which has beckoned me. I was tasked once with searching for the faithful metaphor. no more. That laugh you have, nothing's like it. I'd like to thank the staff and the faculty and all the friends that I've met here in 12 years. It's been the most wonderful experience of my life. And really, it's so memorable because of all the laughter that we've had and all the good, I leave with my heart full every summer, and I go back, and when I'm thinking of writing and when I'm writing my poems, I think of this room and the people in it. I'm going to read a poem for AV. That's what it says in here. You might know who that is. And it takes place here at Sewanee. It's another Sewanee poem at Cedar Hollow Pond. So when you hear that reference, we're here. It's called Knuckleheads. More than once I've fished like slapstick, a comedy of snags, hung in the limbs, dogged the drag, had the bite turn off like a joke fallen flat. Shell cracker, goggle eye, warmouth, stump knocker, Morgan, brim, easy fishing. And God knows that half of the fun was in the naming. So I laughed out loud when you said you called the fat ones knuckleheads. For with what ease a knucklehead, whether prompted by the laughs or not hearing them at all, gets forgiven. As if born plain dumb, as if determined from the get-go to be gung-ho for the hook, the joke. And who else were we two but two stooges, buffoonish, cartoonish, mere caricature, trying to capture the nostalgic, picturesque Norman Rockwell scene at Cedar Hollow Pond, where we figured knuckleheads surely swam around just dreaming of our worms in a world that, it seemed, had lightened up enough to laugh with us. Fat flies all aflutter, frogs leaping from the soft mud banks, and knuckleheads who kept interrupting our jokes when they bent the rod tips, but who on stringers in the shallows had bodies sunlit like oil slicks, or better yet, like old fools in party-colored outfits, flopping and gasping as if laughing along at the joke on them. I'd like to read, I've got one more poem, but before I do, I'd like to read my tribute to Wyatt that I wrote for the book that we gave him after his reading. And then I'll say one more thing. But he also told me that in his retirement, his last wish, his only wish that he wanted people to do was to go buy this book. So if you don't buy it, you've let down 30 years. And here it is. If I must be picky, then one of my top 5 favorite Wyatt Prunty poems is Elderly Lady Crossing on Green, which begins thus: and give her no scouts doing their one good deed or sentimental cards to wish her well. To try and reduce Wyatt Prunty's significance and magnanimity to a blurb, as I am trying to do here, seems like a task as similarly absurd as that of the scouting do-gooder or the sentimental card sender. Maybe it's as easy and simple as this: no one has meant more to me in this game, and no one ever will. For were it not for Wyatt Prunty, it's likely many of us would be declaiming our poems and our stories to empty rooms. Instead, year after year, he built for us a place where our voices belonged, mattered, and were, like Mrs. Gilbert's patience in his poem The Taking Down, completely recognized. Now we owe much to Boss himself, our eternal gratitude, and to the future of letters, his style of dedication, his manner of loyalty. He helped me edit this book, and he had a genius suggestion to, I had this poem last in the book for obvious reasons when I read it, but he suggested that I put it first, and I think it makes sense to sort of play with the idea in the poem. It's called Spoiler Alert. Thank you for being here. Stop here if you don't want to know the end, which was, in truth, inevitable. What you thought was going to happen, happened. If you'd pictured in the end a room, there was a room. If you thought you'd hear people laughing outside the open window, there they stood, and in fluttered the beautiful notes. Whoever you thought would be there was there. See, you didn't even have to see it. You could have, no, you should have stopped there in the beginning, for here it is, the end as you expected, where it always was. Gwen Kirby.
Hello. Thank you all so much for being out here on this last sort of marathon day of the conference. There are so many people in this room for me to thank. Wyatt, first and always, for all of it. Barbara, the faculty who've been so kind to me here. Alice for reading all my earliest short stories and telling me all of them started on page 11 out of 12. Which they definitely did. Leah for telling me my entire doctorate not to look so worried I was doing fine. And to my fellow staff members, all the love in the world. And finally, to Megan. Where are you, Megan? I'll be trying to live up to your example in all the work that I do here. All right, so you don't need to know this about this story, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So I had a friend, and we were like, all right, we got to be trying to produce more writing, so we're going to exchange 500 words every day. And then it was the Dr. Blasey Ford hearings, and he was like, you know, you don't need to do that today. I know you're upset, you know, and I was like, fuck it. Fuck that guy, and he's not going to stop me from writing. And I think the tone of this story it's pretty clear where my head was at. So this story is called A Few Normal Things That Happen a Lot. A woman walks down the street and a man tells her to smile. When she smiles, she reveals a mouthful of fangs. She bites off the man's hand, cracks the bones and spits them out, accidentally swallows his wedding ring, which gives her indigestion. A woman waits for the bus and a man stands too close. He puts his hand on her ass, not knowing she is the first successful subject of a top-secret experiment. She turns her laser eyes on him and transforms him into bus fare, $2.75 in cool coins. A woman is at the grocery store and a man in the frozen food aisle says, "Nice legs." He follows her past the broccoli. "Why is a pretty girl like you here alone?" Past the tubs of Cool Whip. "You got a boyfriend?" Past the ice cream cakes. "Don't you want to say something nice?" She stops at the end cap. There's a sale on chips and salsa. Yesterday, she would not have stopped. She would have feigned fascination with the cheeses, lingered over the pasta sauce, waited for the man to get bored, prayed that the man would get bored. She would have left, buying nothing, the dark parking lot endless, every car disguising a threat. Luckily, last night she was bitten by a radioactive cockroach. Under her clothes, she is covered in armor. Her senses are heightened. When he asks, "You shy or just a bitch?" she hisses at a decibel that shatters the jars of salsa, studs the man's chest with small shards of glass. Salsa splatters everywhere, and a chunk of tomato lands on the hem of her skirt, which is sad because it's newly dry cleaned. In the dark, arms full of groceries, the parking lot is beautiful in a way she's never noticed. A fine rain drifts across the weak lights. The asphalt shimmers and the cars hide nothing. A woman sits alone in her apartment and hears her neighbor, who is drunk, banging down the hall. She does not check her lock, tug the chain to feel it stick. Instead, she picks up the remote control given to her by a witch. If anyone comes in, she will point the remote at the door and turn him off. A woman jogs on a cold day and a man jogs 50, 30, 20 feet behind her. They are the only two people on this path, a narrow ribbon tracing the river, her favorite place to run. She speeds up, and so does he. Her heart begins to hammer, and she curses herself, "Stupid bitch. People have told you not to run alone. You know better, stupid bitch." But then she remembers, thank God, she was recently scratched by a werewolf. The woman lets herself change a bit, turns to the man and pulls off her gloves. Underneath, her hands are covered in fur, the pads black and leathery, and when she extends her claws, the man yelps and runs away. The woman rubs her cold cheeks with her soft fur. She breathes deep and falls back into her even pace. A woman is on the subway and a man sits next to her, even though there are many empty seats. The woman folds her small hands in her lap. The man takes out his dick and begins to masturbate. The woman stands and exits at the next stop. The woman's heart is not racing, she does not feel nauseous, and she does not wonder what she would have done if the man had followed her. No, once she steps onto the platform and the doors close behind her, the woman does not think about the man ever again. This is her superpower, bestowed on her as a baby by her alien mother. She feels absolutely fine and does a bit of work in the early evening before deciding she's tired and ordering Chinese. A woman goes on a date with a man, and while they're walking to the restaurant, they see a woman bite off a man's hand. The man on the date rushes to the man on the ground who is bleeding profusely. The woman on the date asks where the woman with fangs got those teeth. "They look great on you," she says. "Do you think so?" the other woman asks. "They're exactly what I needed for that extra boost of confidence." For the rest of the date, the man with two hands is extremely respectful. The cockroach woman goes to the bank and hopes someone will rob it so she can use her new and amazing powers. Instead, a man in front of her is talking to a woman. The man interrupts the woman. "The thing is," the man says, "it's just too easy to generalize, you know?" The cockroach woman considers ripping off the man's arm, but that would be an overreaction. She deposits a check and feels glum as she walks to work, her newly grown antennae vibrating in the breeze. The same man takes out his dick on the subway. He's sitting next to the woman with a mouthful of fangs. She freezes for a moment, but it's happening, it's really happening, and so she leans over and bites off his dick. She spits it out, no bones in it to break. She leaves it harmless on the floor and gets off at the next stop. She keeps her face calm. She's used to ignoring the screams and the blood, but the taste lingers the rest of the way home. The woman with the magical remote control takes it with her everywhere, in her purse next to her pepper spray and a half-eaten bag of M&Ms. She wouldn't use the remote in public. There's no way to know that she'd hit her target. In a recurring nightmare, a man is yelling at her for messing up his order, a 2-shot half-calf skim latte, you stupid cunt, and in her anger, she turns off the entire coffee shop, the entire block, the whole world, and she presses rewind, but it's too late. She won't take the remote out, but as she walks down the street, she enjoys a fantasy in which she slips her hand into her purse and presses pause. In the still city, she can do anything she wants. She walks for miles, down small alleys, through wooded parks, past the corner where the homeless man yells obscenities, but see, he's quiet now. She's brought them both peace. Werewolf Woman has never before loved being in her body, but now she lets her fur out whenever she's home. She's at her most powerful when she's naked. Sometimes late at night, she stands in the backyard and howls, not because she is sad, but because her lungs are strong, and it's a joy to turn air into sound. Her husband sees how happy she is and asks her to scratch him, turn him too. She wants to. She tries to explain to him that this is kind of her thing, that she needs this for herself. What she knows but can't find the courage to say is that she needs it to not be for him. He says he understands, and she knows he'll never quite forgive her. The fanged woman eats a donut on a park bench, though the fangs make it hard. She's in a bad mood. Her tongue is sore, her cheeks nipped raw, and her blazer is dusted in powdered sugar. She wishes a man would make some comment so she could bite him, but no one does. The fangs, after all, are easy to see. She calls her friend who forgets. Most days I'm fine, she says, her S's emerging with a slight hiss. It's just days like today, I'm tired. That sounds terrible, her friend says, though she wishes they weren't always talking about men. The friend who forgets picks at a seed stuck in her dull teeth. The woman with fangs dusts off the sugar and says she needs to go. A woman walks down the hall of a large academic building after hours. She's 18, a freshman, and at least once a week there's an email from the college about a sexual assault in the area. At the bottom of every email is a bullet point list for ways to keep herself from harm. Despite the warnings not to be, she's there to pick up a paper from her professor's mailbox. When she gets to the mailroom, the door is locked. All this for nothing, and here is the stairwell again. When she was 14, a man in a stairwell stopped her to ask a question, pressed her against a wall, groped her breasts. She runs down the stairs. Tonight they are empty except for the men she peoples them with, and they reach for her like the branches in Snow White's dark forest. She hates that she's a coward, is angry that she calls herself a coward. If her imagination were not occupied, she would notice a $20 bill on the final landing. She would pick up the bill and spend it on a novel or a movie, maybe pay back a friend. A sophomore man finds that money later that night when he's walking calmly down the stairwell. He thinks about a movie he's going to make with his friends, which they will shoot in the park at night while getting high. He enters it in the College Film Festival and places second. Years later, he's a director of indie films. Luckily for the woman, she arrives home safely and the next day is bitten by a radioactive cockroach. Radioactive cockroaches are sweeping the city. She loves her new powers, but she doesn't know how to tell the man she's dating about the changes to her body, so they break up. The woman who watched the woman with fangs bite off the hand of the man gets fangs for herself. She snaps them at her reflection in the mirror. There's blood on the fangs like she imagined, except it's her own blood from where her gums are still aching and raw. The government finds out about radioactive cockroaches when the mayor's wife is bitten in her sleep. The mayor, though they share a bed, is unbitten and unchanged. What a strange thing. What is happening? No one knows, and the infection is spreading quickly. The mayor's wife is taken in for testing. The press reports that the wife is ill and taking some time out of the public eye. On Reddit, conspiracy theories tangle and grow like vines. A woman walks down the street and absolutely no one bothers her. She smiles at the other women she passes. They smile back. Something is different. A woman wears a pair of fake antennae and takes her trash out to the alley behind her apartment, where she's always been afraid to go at night. No one bothers her, except for a large rat who's plump and resentful. Now that she can pretend to be a cockroach, the woman with fangs considers having them removed, but in the end, she's grown too used to feeling safe. What if the radioactive cockroaches prove not to be the answer? What if there's a special taser? What if the scientists hard at work discover a cure? She keeps her fangs and accepts that her mouth will always be a little sore. Fake antenna sales skyrocket. The men of the city do not feel safe. The women of the city experiment. They make baths and stay under the water for 30 minutes, holding their breath deep in their new lungs. They get very drunk on the beer their cockroach bodies love and walk home under the stars, and when they see a man, they hiss, and the man runs away, and they laugh and laugh. Can't you take a joke, they shriek, and they almost feel bad, because two wrongs don't make a right, but one wrong after wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong does make a cockroach woman feel better. Men carry small cans of Raid in their pockets when they go outside at night. It isn't enough, not by a long shot, but they hold them in their hands, a talisman as much as a protection. With all women wearing antennae, there's no way to tell which ones might be dangerous. The woman who forgets and the woman with fangs get coffee, and the woman who forgets tells the woman with fangs that she doesn't understand this new fashion trend. I tried on a pair, she says, but it flattened my hair and gave me a headache. The woman with fangs is on antibiotics. One of her teeth has developed an abscess. Headaches are the worst, she says, and begins to cry. A man cuts off the head of his cockroach girlfriend while she's asleep. She staggers up and kills him and still has a whole week left to live. She walks down the streets, holding her head under her arm so that she can see where she's going. She writes an article for BuzzFeed about embracing the time she has left. But the truth is her severed throat is tight with terror. She wishes she had died 3 days ago, that she'd never become a cockroach. Nothing is worse than knowing that the man she loved cut off her head, except the knowledge that killing him has not made her whole again. 2 women are in their secret lab full of radioactive cockroaches. They wear long white lab coats and thick goggles. Their red rubber gloves go up to their elbows. I hope we did the right thing, one woman says as she gently injects a new serum into a cockroach, then places him in jar number B872. I think getting Mariana the changing table was the perfect choice, the other woman replies, her head bent over a beaker, waiting for the orange liquid to cool. They work long hours, and it's always a relief when it's time to go home. They talk about plans for the evening as they peel off their goggles and gloves and coats. Under their clothes, they are mosaics of failed experiments. Scars across cheeks, toenails hardened into claws, patches of skin that are stone and fur and scales. One woman has the interlocking armor of an armadillo down her spine. The other has a single wing that can't unfold all the way. The feathers clog her shower drain. The women step outside, put on their fake antennae, and walk home holding hands. A man coming toward them nods respectfully and gives them a wide berth. They smile at each other, not evil smiles, but not nice ones either. They feel good and safe, but not as good and safe as they'd imagined. They are distracted from the stars and the cool night air by the places on their bodies that ache and pull and pinch, the itching that never stops. They are proud of what they've done, but that doesn't keep them from sometimes wishing they could be smooth and whole, some softer version of themselves. Thank you.